what happens when a young black woman from Alabama walks into one of the most powerful tech firms in the country and no one realizes she's the new CEO? The sliding glass doors at Holston and Myers Tech Solutions opened at precisely 7:45 a.m. as Tamika Holloway stepped through. She didn't arrive with an entourage, no assistant trailing behind, no designer heels echoing down the marble floor. Just her, in a simple gray dress, flats that had walked more dirt roads than corporate corridors, and a navy tote slung over her shoulder. Her hair was pulled back into a low puff, and the only piece of jewelry she wore was a small silver cross that hung just below her collarbone. From the outside, she looked ordinary, like someone you might pass in a lobby without thinking twice. And that's exactly what most people did. A man in a sleek charcoal suit looked up from his phone briefly as she walked by, then quickly returned his gaze to the screen. Near the elevators, two women in tailored blazers exchanged glances, the kind of silent judgment people pretend is subtle. Tamika noticed. She always noticed. Moments like these had followed her all her life. Back in Monroeville, Alabama, a school principal once told her that applying to Howard was a bit ambitious. She remembered it clearly, not the words, but the look, the same one she was seeing now. As she stepped further into the lobby, she scanned the space. The walls were glass and steel, cold but expensive. A massive digital screen displayed corporate updates. In the corner stood a large fiddle leaf fig, perfectly placed for Instagram, not oxygen. This was the empire she'd been brought in to fix, but today wasn't about commanding a room, not yet. Today was about seeing how this room treated someone it didn't think mattered. As she approached the security desk, a man in his 40s cut in front of her, coffee in one hand, dry cleaning bag in the other. "Oh, perfect," he said without looking up. "You're early. Can you hang this in the marketing storage closet? And maybe this time, try not to wrinkle it, yeah?" Tamika blinked. "Excuse me?" He glanced over briefly. "Aren't you the new temp? Cynthia said someone would be coming in today." Before she could answer, he placed the hanger in her hand and walked off, already focused on his next task. She looked at the suit. Tailored, designer, and absolutely none of her business. Instead of reacting, she smiled gently and laid it across the back of a nearby chair. A younger employee nearby, blonde ponytail, wireless earbuds, iced coffee in hand, had watched the whole thing. "You're supposed to take that to marketing," she said, not unkindly, just bored. "Third floor. I'm not the temp," Tamika replied. Calm, measured, direct. The girl's eyebrows lifted slightly. She wasn't expecting that answer. But before anything else could be said, the elevator doors opened. A broad-shouldered man in a forest green polo stood inside, sipping an energy drink. He looked Tamika up and down. "You lost?" "No, sir." "Admin onboarding?" "HR's on too." "I know where I'm going," Tamika said, stepping in and pressing the button for the 12th floor. He raised an eyebrow. "That's executive." "I know." What she didn't know, not yet, was how deep the problems ran on that floor, or how quickly she'd need to make her presence known. The elevator dinged open to a hallway, unlike any of the others. It was quiet, too quiet. Smoked glass offices lined the walls. Soft carpeting muted footsteps. Success was curated here. Cold, polished, and selective. She stepped out, 10 paces in, and the looks began again. By the espresso machine stood 4 men, all in casual luxury, talking louder than necessary for this early in the morning. One noticed her and nudged his colleague. "She lost?" he whispered with a smirk. Tamika kept walking. She wasn't here for their approval. She approached a large glass door marked Executive Conference Room. A receptionist in her early 20s with sharp eyeliner and glossy nails stood up with the smoothness of someone trained to be helpful, but only up to a point. "Hi," the receptionist said, scanning Tamika's outfit and tote bag. "Are you here to deliver something?" "No." "Okay, catering?" "No." The receptionist's confidence wavered. Sorry, this floor is for executive team members only. Tamika leaned forward, her voice still warm but firm. I know. That's why I'm here. Just then, a tall man in a slim suit strode down the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. He stopped in his tracks when he saw her. You're early, he said, dropping the phone to his side. His name was Alan Brewster, CFO, 12 years in the company. Well-liked, well-paid, and, until a week ago, convinced the next CEO would be him. Tamika gave a polite nod. Good morning, Mr. Brewster. He froze. I'm sorry. And you are? Tamika Holloway. He laughed awkwardly. Oh, okay. You're with the auditing team? She reached into her bag, pulled out a badge and held it up. Her name, her photo, her title, Chief Executive Officer, printed in unmistakable bold. A hush fell over the hallway. The receptionist's hand hovered above her keyboard, frozen. The men by the espresso machine had gone silent. Alan's forced smile faded. I'm sorry. What? But she didn't need to repeat it. She was already in the room. Alan cleared his throat and stepped aside, motioning to the conference room. Of course, right this way. His tone was polite, but his posture betrayed hesitation. Inside, the executive conference room looked like something out of a luxury architecture magazine. A long walnut table stretched from wall to wall, surrounded by black leather chairs and massive 70-inch screens anchored both ends of the room like silent observers. Tamika placed her navy tote gently on a chair near the head of the table. She didn't sit. Instead, she turned to Alan, her tone calm but unmistakably firm. I'd like to begin promptly at 9 show. Please make sure the executive team is seated by then. Alan nodded, still visibly processing everything that had just happened. Yes, of course. He left the room, and the door clicked shut behind him. For the first time that morning, Tamika was alone. She let out a deep breath, steady, quiet, controlled. She'd been in rooms like this before, places where the air was thick with assumption, where people stared just a second too long, trying to figure out who she was or why she belonged. But this moment wasn't about belonging. This moment was about leading. She sat down, opened her laptop, and mentally organized the next hour. Then came a soft knock. The door creaked open, and a woman in her 50s stepped inside. Auburn hair in a sharp bob, red-framed glasses perched on her nose, and eyes that didn't miss much. I heard what happened downstairs, the woman said without introducing herself. You handled it well. Tamika looked up. Thank you. The woman walked forward and extended her hand. Janice Greer, head of legal. Tamika shook it, firm, confident. You're the first person today who didn't ask what I was doing here, Tamika said with a small smile. That's because I read your file, Janice replied. Built a tech company from scratch in rural Alabama. Sold it for 8 figures before you turned 30. I don't need to see your shoes to know you're qualified. Tamika laughed softly. Janice tilted her head. You ready for the wolves? Tamika didn't blink. I grew up around snakes. Wolves don't scare me. But Janice knew something Tamika didn't. This wasn't just a messy corporate culture. Some people here were going to make it personal. Some already had. By 9:03, the conference room was packed. 11 executives. Each took their seat like it was territory. Some had laptops open. Others held expensive pens and leather-bound notebooks that hadn't been touched in years. The only empty chair, the one at the head of the table. Tamika entered without fanfare. No assistant, no announcement. She simply walked over and sat in that chair. A few heads turned. A few phones lit up under the table. Quiet messages were sent. Jason Feld, tall and cocky in his mid-30s, leaned toward the man next to him and whispered something. They both smirked. Janice sat 2 seats away from Tamika, arms folded, watching the room like a seasoned chess player sizing up the board. Tamika didn't wait. "Good morning," she said clearly. Only half the room responded. The rest looked on, skeptical. She let the silence linger. "No need for formalities," she continued. "Yes, I'm the new CEO. No, I'm not here to smile through Q3 projections and compliment the font on your slide decks." She paused, then delivered the blow. "I was brought in because this company is hemorrhaging talent, losing contracts, and quietly imploding under its own arrogance. And from what I've seen so far, that diagnosis is accurate." That got their attention. A woman near the end of the table slowly closed her laptop. A man in a purple shirt leaned back, arms folded, eyebrows raised. Tamika clicked the remote. The screen behind her came to life. Hard numbers, declining contracts, employee turnover rates, HR reports, and internal complaints dating back 2 years, all laid bare. "This isn't a revenue problem," she said. "It's a people problem. One that starts in this room." Jason Feld leaned forward, smiling like he was about to enjoy himself. "With all due respect, Ms. Holloway, you've been here, what, 2 hours? Bit early for sweeping judgments, don't you think?" Tamika didn't flinch. "It would be, if this were based on opinions. But I don't deal in opinions, Mr. Feld. I deal in patterns. I've spent the past 6 weeks reviewing every inch of this company, employee records, project timelines, even your internal Slack threads. Yes, we pulled them, including the exit interviews you thought nobody read." His smile vanished. Someone near the door exhaled, not loudly, but with something that sounded like relief. Tamika turned to another exec, Emily, head of marketing. "You've lost 4 of your top 5 creatives in the last 8 months. Do you know why?" Emily shifted, unsure. "They said they found better opportunities," she answered. "No," Tamika said plainly. "They said they were tired of being silenced, talked over, and dismissed by people with louder voices but less experience." Emily looked down. Tamika paused, scanning the room. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to rebuild a culture that's broken, and change starts at the top." Silence again. Then Jason chuckled, leaning back. "Well," he muttered, "let's see how long this one lasts." Janice turned slowly toward him. "Excuse me?" He shrugged. "We've had 3 CEOs in 5 years. Just saying, the chair's not exactly glued down." Tamika stood. She walked to the head of the table and rested one hand on the back of the chair. "You're right," she said. "This chair hasn't been stable. But I'm not here to warm it. I'm here to bolt it to the floor." Jason looked away. Then she looked at each person in the room, one by one, not as strangers, but as pieces of a machine she was now responsible for. "If you're not ready to rebuild, to listen, to grow, or if you think I'm not the right person to lead this, you're welcome to leave now." Tamika stood tall at the head of the table, folder in one hand, remote in the other. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I'm going to be very clear," she said. "In the last 48 hours, I've reviewed documentation and data confirming serious financial misconduct by multiple executives currently sitting at this table." For a split second, no one moved. Then came the sound of shifting chairs, nervous glances. A few smartphones tilted under the table. Jason Feld, the same man who smirked at her on day 1, let out a scoffing laugh. "Oh boy," he said, casually unwrapping a protein bar. "What is this, round 2? Someone buy lunch with the wrong card?" Tamika didn't respond with sarcasm. She didn't flinch. She clicked the remote, and the screen behind her lit up. A chart of vendor payouts cross-referenced with executive authorizations. Clean, clear, and impossible to deny. "These aren't clerical errors," Tamika continued. "They're patterns. Patterns of inflated contracts routed through a vendor, registered to Mr. Brewster's brother-in-law, signed off repeatedly by Mr. Brewster himself." She paused. Alan Brewster's jaw tightened. His fingers curled slightly on the armrests. Still, he said nothing. That's embezzlement, Tamika stated. And it's not the only case. She turned the page in her folder. Mr. Feld, she said, now locking eyes with Jason, has been issuing referral bonuses under falsified employee profiles. 5 separate payouts last quarter, all sent to the same bank account, registered under a holding name we traced back to his college roommate. Jason blinked. I'd like to remind everyone, she added, that referral bonuses are limited to verified employee referrals, which none of these were. For the first time, Jason didn't have a comeback. In the quiet, Janice, seated near the end of the table, placed a flash drive on the desk in front of her. Everything is documented: names, dates, wire transfers, sign-offs. We'll be turning the files over to legal by the end of day. Tamika let that settle in. No accusations, she said calmly. Only facts. One executive looked physically ill. Another closed her laptop and slowly folded her hands in her lap. I know some of you are wondering, what happens next? Tamika said. Let me answer that. She stepped away from the table and walked slowly toward the window, then turned to face them all again. I'm not here to burn this company down. I'm here to rebuild it. But I will not protect misconduct. Not in the name of comfort, not in the name of tenure. Not because it's easier to look away. Someone shifted nervously. I've already contacted outside legal counsel. Internal compliance is launching a formal inquiry. Those named in the audit will be placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. Alan stood suddenly. This is absurd, he snapped. You're acting like judge and jury. No, Tamika cut in. I'm acting like the CEO. Her tone stayed level, but there was finality in it. The room stilled. Alan hesitated for a moment longer, then stormed out without another word. Jason didn't follow. He just stared at the table, silent. Tamika looked around. I told you on day one. I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to fix something that's been broken for a long time. Then her voice softened just enough to shift the tone. If you're ready to build a company that actually deserves its people, its clients, and its future, now's your chance to prove it. No one moved. No one joked. This time they were listening. Tamika clicked the remote again. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen. Names, dates, payment amounts, and vendor registrations lined up like a map of deception. She pointed to one line. Mr. Feld, she said calmly, here's your name. And here, she pointed to the next row, is a vendor you supposedly referred 5 separate times. She walked closer to the screen, voice steady. The problem? That vendor doesn't exist. And the account receiving the payments? It's under a fake LLC, registered to your cousin in Tampa. Jason opened his mouth to protest, but couldn't find the words. He shut it just as fast. Then, Tamika turned to Alan Brewster. These 10 contracts, she said, flipping the folder open, were all signed under your authority. The receiving vendor was registered only 3 months ago, to your brother-in-law's home address. Alan's face drained of color. This is absurd, he muttered. No, Tamika replied, her voice low but unshakable. This is verified, documented, and already handed over to external legal counsel. The room fell into a thick, suffocating silence. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The facts were louder than any argument. I'll give each of you the opportunity to speak, she said, but know this, you won't be explaining yourselves to me. You'll be explaining yourselves to federal investigators. Janice stood now, walking forward and placing a fresh set of folders on the table. Your emails have been locked, system access suspended, effective immediately. Your roles are under review, and your security credentials have been revoked. Jason shot to his feet, his voice cracking. You can't do this. You're not. I am, Tamika said, cutting him off mid-sentence. I'm exactly who I said I was, and the board granted me full authority to investigate and act. She let that hang for a second. You didn't believe me on Monday. Maybe now you do. Alan tried to speak, to push back, but the room wasn't listening. His words hit the walls and went nowhere. No one backed him. No one followed his lead. Some executives stared blankly at the table. A few exchanged uncomfortable glances. And for the first time, some looked at Tamika with something more than skepticism. It wasn't fear. It was respect. Tamika gathered the printed documents, placed them back into the folder, and said, "If anyone else has something they need to come clean about, my door is open. But let's be clear, this isn't a threat." She paused. "It's a clean start." And with that, she walked out, calm, measured, in control. But not everyone saw that as redemption. For some, it felt personal. One of them was already planning to strike back. Over the next 2 weeks, Holston and Myers felt like a company caught mid-exhale. Jason Feld's office was cleared out in a matter of hours. Alan Brewster was escorted out by security the next morning. No press release, no goodbye speech, just the quiet shuffle of his shoes down the executive hallway. His legacy packed into a cardboard box. The whispers came next, in break rooms, on Slack threads that vanished as fast as they appeared. No one knew what Tamika would do next, but she didn't show up swinging a wrecking ball. She brought folding chairs, literally. That following Monday, she rolled out a circle of chairs into the center of the open floor plan and invited 20 employees from different departments: tech, sales, customer service, janitorial. No titles, no agenda, just people. "I want to know what it feels like to work here," she told them. No filters, no corporate talk. "If this company were a person, how would you describe them?" A young IT guy raised his hand. "Fake." An older woman from customer support nodded. "Exhausting." Someone in the back mumbled, "Clicky." They talked. She listened. No laptops, no phones, just notebooks and raw honesty. She made it a habit, every other day, a new group, a new circle. And she asked the kinds of questions no CEO before her had ever cared to ask. What does respect look like here? How do you know your work matters? What's the last thing that made you want to quit? And she didn't write notes to look busy. She wrote because she was going to follow through. People noticed. Janice caught her one evening after hours, standing at a whiteboard, sketching out a new office layout. "You're redesigning the floor plan?" she asked. Tamika nodded. "No one collaborates because everyone's walled off. That's not an office. That's a maze." She erased a section of the board and added something in bold letters. "No more corner offices." Janice raised a brow. "Even yours?" Tamika smiled. "Especially mine." By the third week, something shifted. HR started getting thank you emails. Something unheard of. Mid-level managers began asking for feedback instead of barking orders. Tamika launched a program called Open Friday, where any employee could book 10 minutes to talk with her, one-on-one. The first week filled in under an hour. One meeting stood out. Letitia from operations walked in, nervous. She didn't have notes, no pitch. She just stood there, quiet for a moment. "I don't have a question," she said. I've never seen anyone in leadership who looks like me, and not just how you look, how you carry yourself. I wanted to say thank you." Tamika leaned forward, voice gentle. "Letitia, you belong in any room you walk into. You don't need my permission for that, but I appreciate you saying it." Letitia smiled. "No one's ever said that to me." But while things were changing, not everyone welcomed that change. An email had started moving behind the scenes, a formal complaint, anonymous, accusing Tamika of discrimination and unjust termination. The sender? Connected to the board. Janice dropped the printed email on Tamika's desk one morning. "Alan," she said simply. And just like that, the pushback had officially begun. The complaint was anonymous, but the language was familiar. Too familiar. Janice dropped the paper on Tamika's desk. "It's Alan," she said flatly. He didn't sign it, but it's him, guaranteed. The wording was polished, almost clinical. But underneath the legal phrasing was bitterness, accusing Tamika of creating a hostile work environment, of retaliating, of letting personal bias guide her decisions. It was venom in a velvet envelope. Tamika read it silently, then slid the page aside. They knew something like this might come, she said, calm but steady. That's why I documented everything, every meeting, every termination, every approval. I kept records. Janice nodded. Good, because this isn't really about what's written on that page. It's about who wants the old system back. The board called for a formal review. Not dramatic, just procedure, they said. But everyone knew what it was. A test. A quiet attempt to reassert control. The day of the review, Tamika walked into the boardroom alone. No legal team. No assistants. Just a black binder under her arm and the same steady walk she'd carried since the day she arrived. 7 board members sat at the long table, folders in front of them, eyes unreadable. A silver-haired man in a crisp blue tie cleared his throat. Ms. Holloway, we're here to discuss several concerns brought to our attention regarding actions taken during your first month, particularly around terminations and company culture. Tamika placed the binder on the table and opened it with precision. Inside, you'll find full documentation, dates, records, witness statements, and legal sign-offs. Every single termination was based on verified misconduct. Another board member, a woman in a green blazer, leaned forward. This isn't only about procedures. There's concern the tone of the company has shifted too quickly, that certain groups feel excluded. Tamika paused, just for a moment. Then she spoke. With respect, she said, this company spent years operating like a gated community. A few voices held all the power, and the rest kept their heads down and their mouths shut. That's not leadership, that's survival. And I wasn't hired to preserve survival. I was hired to build something better. She flipped to a page of graphs. Since day one, employee engagement is up 46%. HR complaints have dropped more than 50%. We've saved over $1.2 million by ending unethical contracts. And for the first time in 5 years, we've actually retained our senior engineers. She looked directly at the board. I'm not sorry the tone has changed. It had to. Silence. No one said a word, except one. An older black woman on the board, who until now had been quietly observing, leaned forward and said, We've waited years for someone to say that out loud. The man in the blue tie cleared his throat again, but this time he sounded smaller. Thank you, Ms. Holloway. We'll be in touch shortly. Tamika nodded, gathered her binder, and walked out of the room the same way she walked in, unshaken. 3 days later, the board sent their decision. The review was closed. No action needed. Her decisions would stand. She didn't post about it, didn't brag, no big internal announcement. The next morning, she walked into the break room with a box of fresh donuts and sat down next to the interns like it was any other day. Y'all like chocolate glaze or nah? She asked with a smile. A guy from analytics laughed. I knew you were different. Tamika looked at him. Different doesn't mean temporary. I'm not going anywhere. And that's what people remembered. Not the firings, not the power moves, but the fact that she showed up every single day, calm, grounded, real. Even when she was doubted, insulted, underestimated, she never raised her voice. She didn't have to. A month later, Holston and Myers didn't look different on the surface. The glass still gleamed. The titles on the doors hadn't changed. But the energy had. Meetings felt open, not staged. Employees who used to stay quiet now spoke up. Department heads who never interacted were brainstorming together over lunch. The dreaded Friday all-hands meetings? They'd turned into actual conversations. Messy, yes, but honest. And now and then, someone would pull her aside, not to ask for a favor, not to network, but just to say thank you. not because she saved the company, but because she made it human again. Tamika never needed to declare victory. Her presence said it all, that you can be soft-spoken without being weak, underestimated without being unprepared, kind without being naive. Her story wasn't just about becoming CEO. It was about what she did once she got there. She didn't wait for permission, didn't beg to fit in. She walked in, called out what was broken, and changed the system from the inside out. And maybe that's what we should remember. The world will try to measure you by your voice, your skin, your resume, your background. It'll try to box you in before you even sit down. But when you walk into that room, whatever that room is for you, and someone looks at you like you don't belong, don't waste your time proving them wrong. Just do the work. Let your results speak for themselves. Because real leadership doesn't shout. It listens, it builds, and it refuses to back down. So if you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, written off, remember this. Keep going. Keep building. Keep showing up. Because one day, they'll realize you were the CEO the whole time. And now, maybe it's your turn. If this story meant something to you, pass it on. Someone out there is walking into their own day one, and they have no idea what they're about to change.